Hi, and welcome to this beginner mini-series on how to create an AI-powered NPC character in Unity. In this first episode, we are going to be working with patrol points and how to get your NPC to patrol around the map automatically. So I hope you stick around, and here we go. First, we are going to start by opening up the Unity Hub and making a new project. I'm going to click on the arrow next to New and create a project under Unity version 2020.1.2 F1. Now, you can use whatever version you want, since everything that we will be doing is universal, but this is the version that I will be using. Next, give your project a name, select the 3D option, and then hit Create. With the new project open, we now need to create the scene that our enemy will be using to patrol around. So first off, I'm going to create a surface for the enemy to walk on. So we're going to go to 3D object and then select plane. And we now have a plane. I'm going to scale this up a little bit and then also set its position to 0, 0, 0 so that it is right in the middle of our scene. There we go. And the plane is looking a little bit gray, so I'm going to create a new material to make it green. Okay, so I'm going to right click in the project window here, hover over create, select folder, and name it materials. And now I'm going to right click on materials, hit create, and then select material. And let's just call this green. And then I'm going to click and drag green onto the plane here. And let's select the color in the inspector. So we can select the color by left clicking on the color picker and then just adjusting it so that it is green. There we go. Now I'm going to create the actual enemy NPC. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be an enemy. It can literally be anything. So I guess in this case, we just call it an NPC. So I will hit the plus icon right here, hover over 3D object, and then let's select a capsule for this selection, and I dragged the capsule up on top of the plane so that it is in view, and let's just move it, actually let's move it to 0, 0 on the X and Z axis, and then move it up a little bit on the Y axis so that it's a little bit above the ground, and let's make this capsule red. So I'm going to right click on materials again, hover over create, select material, and I will name it red. There we go. Drag red over onto the capsule and change its color to red. There we go. So we now have our NPC capsule and we now have our plane. Let's change the names of these. So I'm going to left click on plane, type in ground. I'm going to left click on capsule, left click on it again, and let's call this NPC. There we go. So now that we have named them, we now have to finish setting up the environment for its patrolling waypoints. And this is where Navmesh baking comes into play. This plane here needs to be navigation static for the NPC to be able to walk around in it. And navigation static means that a Navmesh will be baked onto it depending on whether it is walkable or not. Let me show you exactly how that works. So I already have the navigation tab here, but if you don't have it, go over to Window, hover over AI, and then select Navigation. And then that should automatically bring up the navigation window. And in this case, I have it all the way on the right-hand side over here. I'm going to expand this a little bit. There we go. So now, if you were to select the ground, and you were to go to the Objects tab of Navigation, you could see that there is a navigation static tick mark right here. I'm going to select that and keep the navigation area at walkable because we want the NPC to be able to walk around the plane here. Now all we have to do is select Bake, go to the Bake tab here, and then click Bake, and as you can see, this nice blue-green mesh now appeared on top of the green plane. And this is the area where the NPC can walk around in, depending on where you set the Navmesh agent to go to. Awesome, there we go. So let's go back to the inspector so that it hides that. Next, we need to make it so that the NPC can interact with this Navmesh right here. And we are going to do that by putting a Navmesh agent on the NPC. Now in the NPC inspector, I'm going to select Add Component, and I'm going to type in agent. Now I've already typed it, so this brings up the Navmesh agent, left click, And that is all that we have to do for that. We would have to write a script to be able to tell the Navmesh agent to go somewhere, but we are going to do that shortly. The last thing that I want to do is create the waypoints that the NPC is going to patrol around, and we will use the script to interact with these later, but I just wanted to set these up right now. Okay, so I'm going to right click and select create empty, and I'm going to name this to waypoints. And inside this empty game object, I'm going to make a bunch of other empty game objects that will enable us to actually put our waypoints around. I'm going to right click on waypoints, hover over 3D object, and select a sphere. Okay, so I'm going to name this waypoint 1, and there we go. So the reason why I created a sphere is so that we can visualize where the waypoint is. And the fact that you can see the sphere doesn't really matter because we can always go over to the mesh renderer and disable it. So it disables the sphere. I'm also going to get rid of the sphere collider on it because we don't need it. I'm going to click on the 3 dots right here and select remove component. There we go. So we have now created our first waypoint. We can put this wherever we want. For this scenario, I'm just going to put it right here. And now we can duplicate this. Waypoint 2, let's move it over here. Waypoint 3, let's move it over here. Waypoint 4, let's move it right here. How about that? And I'm just going to rename these real quickly. Waypoint 2, Waypoint 3, and Waypoint 4. There we go. So pretty much the scene is already set up. It's actually that simple. So now we are going to create the script that will enable our NPC to patrol from point to point. And also, one thing to mention, that these points can be moved around at any time. So this is completely dynamic. They don't have to be in the same place when the scene runs. They can change around and the NPC can go wherever they are at their current position, which is amazing. Alright, we are now going to make the script. So to do that, I'm going to right click in the project window and hit create and then C# script. And let's call this NPC because this won't be just for the patrolling. We're also going to put in the attacking and pretty much everything else in this series as far as AI goes. I'm going to hit enter and this will compile the script. And while this is here, let's also make a folder for this. Right click, create folder, and let's say scripts. There we go. Hit enter, click and drag the NPC script into scripts. Let's wait for that to compile. And here's what we're going to do. We are going to right click on this and hit open C# project. Once that is done, we can minimize that and then double click on NPC to open the script. There we go. So we have now opened the script. Now, this is what we have to do. We only have to make 3 variables for this, and I will type them out right here. We need to write public transform square brackets waypoints. This will be the array of waypoints that the script will use. So it will be these 4 spheres right here, or whatever you have in your scene. Okay? So these will be our waypoints, and we will assign these later. Now, we need to have a boolean as to whether we want to loop the waypoints or not. So we're going to say public bool loop waypoints equals true. And we're just setting this to true by default, but basically what this boolean is going to do is when the NPC goes through all of the waypoints, this boolean will determine whether the NPC will keep on going. And this is just a nice control feature that we will have to our advantage. So now we will have private nav. Okay, so we have to make the Navmesh agent variable because we need to reference the Navmesh agent variable in our script. So we are going to say mesh agent agent. Now notice that the C# script is not recognizing the Navmesh agent. We actually have to import a new library. So on the line on top here, we are going to type in, using unityengine.ai, and that should now make it so that it recognizes the Navmesh agent. Now this is set to private because we can actually assign this in the start method, and I will show you how to do that right away. Let's get rid of these comments here. Let's also get rid of system.collections.generic up on line 2 because we actually don't need that. We do need system.collection, so we are going to use that. So now in the start method, we are going to type this. So we are going to assign the agents to our agent variable. So we're going to say agent equals get component. We're going to say navmesh agent. What this does is this goes into our NPC object and it collects the Navmesh agent component that we put on it earlier in the tutorial, and it assigns it to this variable, which means that when we want to grab our Navmesh agent, we don't have to say get component Navmesh agent all the time, we just have to say agent. This is also better for performance because if you just reference a variable as opposed to running this method every single time, you will save a bit more memory by doing that. We actually don't need the update method either, so we are going to get rid of that. What we do need though is something called an IEnumerator, and this is part of coroutines. Now coroutines sound complicated, but they are really not that complicated. A coroutine is basically a method, except you can have wait times on certain lines of the method. So let's just write it out. So we're going to say IEnumerator patrol. And there we go. So this is how you write it. Now we have a red squiggly line here because it wants us to return something. In this case, we are just going to say this, yield return null. Now I will show you what this line means in just a second, but here's what we have to do. We are just going to start this coroutine in the start method. So this is the same thing as calling a method, but it is calling this method as a coroutine, and Unity has its own specific way of doing that. So we are going to say start coroutine, and then in quotes we're going to say patrol, because that is the name of our coroutine right there. So now whenever the script starts in the start method, it's going to actually run this patrol method right here. Now you must be thinking, but wait, the method doesn't do anything yet. Well, that's what we are going to do right now. Now let me tell you exactly what yield return null means. This means that this method is going to wait 1 frame. Null means 1 frame in this case. However, we can actually make it wait for longer than 1 frame by doing this. Yield return new, wait for seconds, and we can put anything we want in the argument here. So I'm just going to say 1, and we can actually get rid of this line here. What this line does right here is this is saying, okay, method wait for 1 second. So for example, you don't have to type this out. This is just as an example. If we print hi to the console, and then we print hello to the console right after that, notice that hi is before the wait for seconds and hello is after it. It's going to print hi instantly and then wait 1 second and then print hello next. So there we go. That's what wait for seconds does. It sounds complicated, but in essence it's really simple, and we are going to use this as our advantage to having our NPC doing patrol. So first off, here's what we need to do. We need to type in agent.setDestination waypoints index of 0 dot position. This will say, hey agent, I want you to go to this destination of the 0th index of waypoints. So the first element dot position. Okay, so this will go to our first waypoint right here. Perfect. Now here's what we need to do. We need to track which waypoint the NPC is at, and we are going to do that by making a new local variable by saying int waypoints equals 0, and this number right here is going to be the same as the index of this right here. Now as you can see, we could see variable waypoint is assigned but its value is never used. Just ignore that for now. We are going to start using it very soon. So right now we have to make a while true loop. So I'm going to say while true. There we go. We do not need this anymore. And this is grayed out because while true runs forever. So it's never going to reach the line below it unless you actually call a break function to break out of the while true loop. So here's what we have to do. It is telling the agent to go to the first position. We need to wait until the agent has reached the first position before telling it to go to the second position. So we have to essentially say, okay, patrol, just wait until the NPC has acquired a certain distance away from the next waypoint. So we are going to say if vector 3 dot distance waypoints of index waypoint dot position transform dot position is less than, and this can be any value. For this example, let's just set it to 2. Okay, so what is this if statement doing? It is calling vector3.distance waypoints of index waypoint dot position and transform position. So this is saying how far away am I from the next waypoint. So basically, if the enemy is greater than or equal to 2 units of distance away from the waypoint, then we're just going to do nothing. But if it is less than 2, then we are going to run whatever code is in here. In this case, we want to increment the waypoints. Now here's what we are going to do. We are going to say waypoint ++. So this is going to tell the script that we want to go up in waypoints and we want the Navmesh agent to advance in waypoints because it has reached its current waypoint. However, there's a problem. What if we want to loop the waypoints? Well, essentially what we would have to do is we would have to check if the waypoint is at the end. So we have to create a conditional that will enable us to tell if the NPC has reached the final waypoint. So we are going to say if waypoint equals nope, not an S, waypoint, there we go. If waypoint equals waypoints dot length -1. So it's going to detect if this waypoint is basically at the end of its array. We are going to say waypoint equals 0. So this will reset this variable back to 0. So the tracker as to which waypoint we want to go to next will be set to 0. So the very first element, else waypoint ++. Going to cut that and paste it there. Now we don't want this to happen if loop waypoints is set to false. So we are going to put another if statement and say if loop waypoints, let's create some curly braces here. Let's put waypoint equals 0 into that. And let's just beautify this a little bit. There we go. Now, what happens if we don't want to loop the waypoint? We are just going to say break. And this will break out of this while loop right here. And now, as you can see, not all code paths return a value now. So what we have to do is we just have to put return null at the very end of this method. Let me just beautify this a little bit more. And let's see, where is the end of this while loop? It is right here. Right after the while loop, you're going to say yield return null. There we go. And that should fix that error. There we go. So now we're going to say else waypoint ++, and we need to say agent dot set destination waypoint of index waypoint dot position. There we go. So we have to put that there. We also have to put that in this line right here, waypoint equals 0. And actually we could just simplify this to 0 right there. And there we go. So there is one last thing that we need to add in the script. We have to say yield return new, wait for seconds, and let's just say 0.5f. Now we need to put this at the end of the while true loop because we do not want this while true loop to run infinite times in a frame. This will literally freeze your game. So essentially we need to run this at the end of the while true loop to refresh the cycle so that the game does not freeze. So we are going to save this and go into Unity and see what happens. So we are now back in the editor. Now I had to reassemble everything in the scene because I accidentally crashed Unity without saving, so things might look a little bit different, but lesson learned, save everything. So we are going to click on the NPC and we are going to add the NPC script. So we are going to left click and drag the NPC script into this. Loop waypoints is already set to true, which is what we want in this case. We are going to expand the waypoints array, set the size to 4 because we have 4 waypoints, and we are going to click and drag the waypoint transforms into the array. Now they are transforms and not game objects because we only need the position of them, so we don't really need the game object class. We only need transform. So now let's just run the script or run the scene and see what happens. So it goes to the first waypoint, and then it's going to go over to the second waypoint. It's going to go over to the third waypoint, which is actually this one. That's actually one of the changes that I made in my scene. It's going to go to 4, and now it's going to loop all the way back to 1. And this is exactly what we need. Now what happens if we were to uncheck loop waypoints? Let's see what happens. So it's going to go to waypoint 4, and it's just going to stop there, which is exactly what we want it to do. So there we go. We have successfully written the patrol script for our NPC to patrol around. Now there is one more thing that I want to do just to demonstrate to you how powerful this is. I'm just going to create a few obstacles for the NPC to go around. So I'm going to create a cube, and let's just drag this up a little bit. Let's make it a little bigger. There we go. So obviously the NPC cannot go on top of this. Let's add a new material. I'll just make it a blue material. And blue, there we go. That will be the color of the obstacle. And we are going to go into the navigation tab of this. And we are going to go to the object and we are going to click navigation static. And this is going to be not walkable. So now what happens is when we bake is that the nav mesh conforms around the obstacle so that the NPC cannot go into it. And if I were to move this, as you can see, the nav mesh doesn't update. We would have to click bake again. So we click bake again. There we go. So let's move this around and see if the NPC can go around obstacles. So here's our first waypoint. Let's move our obstacle over here and let's make it kind of big. There we go. So the NPC is going to have to work to get around this. And let's make the third waypoint right here. And then the fourth waypoint right here. Alright, let's see what happens. Let's move the NPC over to the first waypoint. And let's, well, first off, let's bake. There we go. And let's demonstrate this working. So I'm actually going to first go to the waypoints and disable the mesh renderer so that they're invisible. And I'm also going to get rid of the sphere collider again because I forgot to do that when I reset the scene. You already did that, so you don't have to do that. So now we are going to hit play and watch the player go around the obstacle. So it is going around the cube to the first one. And yeah, so it went to waypoint 3. Now it's going to turn around and go to waypoint 4. And we have loop waypoints enabled, so it should go back to the first one. There we go. And there we go. We now have all of this set up. So you can use this however you want, and this is the AI of the NPC going from waypoint to waypoint. In the next episode, what we're going to do is we are going to create a player, and we are going to have it be so that if the NPC sees the player, or if it's within the NPC's view range, if the player is in the NPC's view range, then the NPC is going to chase the player down. So that is state number 2 of our AI series. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.